He called her to ask something. Fado was shocked to see his eyes were red and said they were like his eyes, but when he tried to evaluate it, he couldn't get any information. He wanted to say something but felt it was too soon. Fado was confused and asked him what. Explained that he came to kill Cobalt, the monster the man mentioned earlier, but he didn't care and told him to keep it to himself. Fado wondered who he was and why he said that. When Roxy appeared, she said that the girl he saw might be from Galia, but Galia had already been destroyed. Roxy explained that 4,000 years ago Galia was a great military power, but has been destroyed since then. A horde of monsters had wiped out all those people, then Fado believed there were survivors. Roxy would also be surprised to see someone from Galia, but now they're back home together. At that moment, the portal told him that he already knew he was going monster hunting and asked if he would be okay doing it alone. Roxy told him that he was a holy knight and he wouldn't be alone because the fighters here would accompany him, so there wouldn't be a problem. At that moment, Roxy was confused and dropped all the grapes she was carrying, so they quickly gathered them all up. The next day, a tragedy occurred. Most of the vineyards had been destroyed by monsters. They immediately went to kill them again, and when they found them, they were surprised to see one that was much bigger. It was the leader of the Cobalts. Fado felt very eager to kill it, and his eyes almost turned red. He was worried Roxy would see him like that. He quickly evaluated the monster and realized it was level 50, which meant it was very strong. It was a rare type, born from the violence that had occurred over the years. The fighters were very worried because they felt they wouldn't be able to defeat it. Roxy told them it was okay because she would take care of it. She promised to protect the land and its people. So, after that, everything became calm. Avaricia told Fado that he wouldn't be able to do it alone because it was too heavy for a young holy knight. So, Fado wouldn't let Roxy go fight because he would take care of all the Cobalts. So, at night, he went to face them. Before fighting, he analyzed the situation and realized their leader was surrounded by the others. So, he drew his sword and Avaricia underwent a new transformation, which was a bow. Fado took it and began to kill all the Cobalts surrounding the strongest one. Quickly, he activated his ability and greed, and his fighting style significantly improved. It's impressive how he defeated them all quickly. He almost killed their leader, but the monster wouldn't give up that easily. So, Fado had to fight up close. Avaricia turned back into a sword and Fado was determined to kill it. But the monster used one of its powers which made Avaricia tell him not to get close because it could kill him. So, Fado dodged it, but one of the Cobalts wounded him. But thanks to his healing ability, he quickly recovered. The monster took advantage of this to attack him, but fortunately it didn't succeed. Fado was thrown but remained unconscious. Then, a Cobalt approached to kill him, but the clever Fado pretended to be unconscious. Finally, he killed the monster. Now only the Cobalt leader remained. Avaricia told him that he could now use his hidden ability at level 1, but to do so, he had to give up 10% of his attributes. Fado quickly agreed, and we saw how Avaricia transformed into a deadly weapon. As he fired, he killed the monster, destroying it. Fado defeated all the Cobalts, but he left a big mess which surely would attract everyone's attention. At that moment, something happened to him, and his eyes turned red. He began to feel joy throughout his body as his sugar ability was filled with high-quality souls. This meant his body felt joyful, although he managed to control it. The next day, all the fighters gathered at the place where Fado fought, including Roxy. They were surprised by what happened and wondered who killed all the Cobalts. Then, at lunchtime, Roxy told her mother what happened, and she still wondered who could do something like that. She remembered the girl from Galia yesterday and said that the people of Galia are stronger than the Holy Knights, so she might have done it. Fado was just surprised, following the flow. But Roxy is now calmer because there are no more monsters. Then Roxy's mother talked to Fado. She made a request. She wanted Fado to support her daughter and stay by her side always. She knew that Fado might not have the strength of a holy knight, but what mattered most was his willingness to help from the heart. If only she knew Fado's true power. Fado asked how that could happen, then her mother told her what happened to her. It turns out Roxy's mother was a queen and had no powers, but she could support her husband who was Sir Mason. She felt that Roxy only having her father as a holy knight had caused her a lot of trouble. As she started coughing, she felt very bad. She said she didn't have much time in this world, so she wanted Fado to support her daughter. Of course, Fado said he would. Then together with Roxy, they returned to the Hard family home, and Fado looked very worried. At night, he went out to kill monsters to satisfy his craving. Fado wondered if he deserved something like that because he was playing everyone and keeping secrets about his abilities. In observation, he saw that his eyes were red. Avaricia said that elves were no longer enough to satisfy him, so he had to look for higher level monsters, but they were not found nearby. This worried him, but for now, the situation wasn't too bad because only one of his eyes was red. So he had time to think about what he would do. The next day, he went to the restaurant where he usually ate, and we saw him wearing an eye patch to hide that his eyes were red. He still feels bad for hiding it from Roxy about his abilities and everything. When the man we saw earlier who became Fado's friend arrives, he tells the bartender that the Holy Knight Adu will join the corpse hunters now. The term corpse is how everyone refers to those who kill monsters at night, which is Fado. Of course, Fado will be surprised to hear this. Then they tell him that someone will go on an expedition to Galia. Fado gets involved and tells them it's impossible because Sermon has just died, but the expedition is decided by the Holy Knights and surprisingly they choose Roxy to do it. From the facial expressions of others, it seems they have something against her, but Roxy will go to her father's grave to tell him that she was chosen for the expedition to Galia and asks for his protection. Fado comes to tell her not to go because she might not come back, but Roxy says she will because she has already decided. After that, Fado can't interfere so he can only stare at her. Then Blarick says that the Hard family is an obstacle for them and other knights, so the expedition to Galia is the Hard family's business. They will be happy because finally they will get rid of Roxy and they prepare for it. Raphael and Memel will go to a village to find information about immortality, so Adu has to take care of Fado. Well, more precisely, the person who kills monsters at night. Then, at night, we see Fado going hunting to satisfy his lust. He says he can't stop Roxy, but he won't let others be treated like trash and suffer. He refers to all the bad things done to people as monsters or holy knights abusing their rank. And just as he says that, behind him appear his people to kill him, asking if he is the corpse everyone talks about, and as he turns to look sharply, we see Fado's eyes turning redder. They say they will handle the situation, so they start fighting. Fado will easily defeat him without using his sword, and even some people run away. In the end, Adu will be left alone and also very scared. Seeing how strong Fado is, he is determined to fight. At that moment, Fado removes his head cover and mask so that he can be recognized by the person who has been tormenting him all this time. Adu will be surprised to see that the lick everyone talks about is Fado. They then fight. Fado asks Fado to show his strength as a holy knight to see what he can do, but before that, he evaluates him to know what attributes he has. One catches his attention, which is the ability of the holy sword that allows Adu to become a holy knight. So Fado wants to destroy his sword so that he can't use his ability. He asks Barasai if he can do it, and he answers that it won't be a problem. Thus, the battle begins. Adu will use his power, but Fado quickly appears behind him to strike his sword and easily destroy it. Now Adu has no weapon to fight with, so Fado has the advantage. Although he seems to want to escape, Fado holds him back and says he must be taught a lesson. There, he remembered how Fado had treated him as if he was worthless. Adu asked him to stop, but Fado's anger and desire for revenge were too great, so he began to hit him against the trees. Adu was already very hurt at this point. He kept pleading for Fado to stop, but Fado said how dare he ask that after treating him badly. Not just to him, but also to the people in the city and even to Roxy for sending him on such a dangerous expedition. Saying this, Fado, angrier than ever, threw him into the air and Avaricia transformed into a very powerful weapon, and as Fado used it against Adu, we saw an extraordinary display. But he wasn't dead at that point. He lost his arm and leg. Now he was in worse condition than before. He didn't want to continue living and just begged Fado to kill him right away. Fado wanted to know how the decision for Roxy to be chosen for the expedition to Galia was made. Adu said that although he chose her, he always agreed to do it because of his desire to save everyone. Fado knew that the expedition was very dangerous. Adu said that if he agreed, he would cancel his order for Roxy not to go, but Fado refused because Roxy had already left for Galia. So he took his sword and killed him on the spot. The man's abilities were stolen by Fado, who used the Holy Sword Bara's technique and was told that he should have become a holy knight by now. But Fado didn't care. First, because the capital wouldn't accept him as a knight, and second, he wasn't interested in becoming a knight either. So Avaricia offered him something. If he gave him all the attributes he gained after killing the man, he could use level 2. After doing so, we see Avaricia getting a new transformation which becomes a scythe. He said with the scythe he had, he could cut anything, so this was very useful for Fado. A few days later, Fado was very sad after Roxy left because he was afraid they wouldn't meet again. He said that her expedition would last about 3 years, but 3 years was a long time, so he didn't want to stay still. He thought about what he could do to help Roxy and decided to go with her to support her. He immediately began to gather all his belongings to leave the next day. But before that, he bid farewell to his friends with whom he worked. They said they would miss him and that he could come back anytime, and they would also give him some money for all the time he spent here. Fado was surprised to see the large amount of money, but he accepted it with great gratitude. Then he parted ways with his other friends and the city and finally set off for Galia. On the other hand, we see Roxy meeting with other fighters who will support her in the expedition. She tells them that they will face a divine dragon that has awakened after 1,000 years and asks them to prepare for battle. Then a fighter named Miria, who is also Roxy's friend, approaches her to greet her. She too will be part of the group. Then another fighter comes. His name is Mugen. He says he volunteered because of Sermon, and when he heard that Sermon had died, he decided to avenge him. Roxy is impressed to hear this and thanks him for his support, but she thinks maybe her family won't let her go. But Mugen says that his daughter requested artifacts from Galia because his whole family are wise people and he's the only fighter, so he promises to bring back artifacts for them to study. Roxy is happy with Mugen, and Maria believes that the journey with them will be very enjoyable. On the other hand, we see a scientist named Ray responsible for investigating the person who killed monsters at night, which is Fado. They have some parts of the fairy killed by Fado, but no wounds from ordinary arrows. This is very interesting to Ray. Searches through his books and finds the magical bow used by Fado. Ray knows about this because he says that the magical bow is an ability of the Black Sword, one of the weapons of great sins, which is Avaricia and is now carried by Fado. Says he wants to be able to see all the weapons of great sins with a somewhat fearful expression. On the other hand, we see Fado has already traveled to Galia to accompany Roxy, but she has to stop in the city of Tetra. The place where the carriage to Galia Tetra departs is where many merchants gather with the best goods from the south, and it is also the city where she lived with her father. However, since 5 years ago, Fado has never returned. She heads to take the carriage to Galia, but she realizes it's too late and no one wants to take her because they're afraid of attacks at night. So she has to wait until tomorrow. Meanwhile, as she looks around the city where she used to live, Fado's stomach starts growling, so she decides to find a place to eat. Fado wants to eat some meat, so she decides to treat her. He arrives at a restaurant. He's a man asking for help from some soldiers to save the city, but they refuse because the money offered is not enough. As the man is about to leave, one of the soldiers smashes his head, demeaning him. Fado quickly approaches to defend, saying that's enough. His friends want to hit her, but Fado gives them a lesson. Then the child thanked him for his help. Fado said it had been a long time since they last met. His name was Set, and when Set looked at him carefully, he realized it was Fado. Here we see their memories as children, where Set and other children used to tease him because of his big appetite. We also see memories of his father in this town. Fado greatly admired his father for his strength and their good relationship. But unfortunately, his father passed away 5 years ago, leaving him alone without direction. The people in the town didn't want him there because no one wanted to take care of him. This part is very sad because after losing his father, everyone drove him out of the town, throwing stones at him as if he were nobody. Then Z asked Fado for help to save the town. Fado said it was selfish, but now as a warrior, he needed his strength. Avarice told him to accept it because Fado was very hungry and needed to satisfy it by killing monsters. So Fado agreed. Set became calmer upon hearing this and immediately took him to where the monsters might attack. Fado said he still felt resentful towards Set, but the town was where he had memories with his father, and just because of that, he agreed. When they arrived, Fado spoke to the mayor and some people who didn't want to accept his help. They were angry because Set brought someone who had been banished from the town. Set explained that Fado was strong, and he had seen him defeat several warriors in front of him. But this didn't convince the mayor, who called him a fool. He said that tomorrow he would look for better warriors. One of them said they couldn't wait until tomorrow because the monsters could attack anytime. So the mayor agreed temporarily, but harshly, calling Fado a sacrifice so that he would have time to find more warriors. Fado was angry, but he was asked to control himself and not listen to them anymore. Then he took him home to stay overnight. Asked where his wife was, whom he hadn't seen until now. Told them that the monsters had killed her because the mayor had absolute authority. The mayor was like his father and always believed that he was always right, but when he had his daughter, he realized many things and changed greatly for her sake. This made Fado feel a little better because he realized that Set was no longer the same as before and maybe he shouldn't hold a grudge against him. Fado then asked him to tell more about the monsters. He was told that they first appeared a month ago and according to witnesses, there should be more. These creatures could fly, and therefore the village couldn't defeat them, so they were looking for fighters who could. Reminded himself of tribes, he was told that he was still as hungry as before and immediately went to find something for him to eat. At that moment, Fado appeared and said that the monsters were like gargoyles, with above-average intelligence. They made trial attacks to see how their victims reacted, and when they saw an opportunity, they attacked simultaneously. Then Set's daughter approached him and asked who he was talking to. Fado replied that he was talking to himself, somewhat embarrassed. He kindly offered the candy to the girl, who immediately ate it. Then he asked the girl if she wanted to play, and she happily accepted. They both began to play wrestle. Later, C came bringing food, but when he tried a bit, he didn't feel well and fainted. C didn't know what happened. His daughter said that she gave him the candy, but the candy was sent by her grandfather, who was the mayor, to be given to Fado, and as she said, Fado would be the monster's victim. All of it was planned. They tried to wake him up, but the medicine given was too strong, so it would be difficult to wake him up. On the other hand, we see Set's father wondering where Fado is because he should be the victim, but one of the monsters takes him and kills him. They knew herbal medicines, so they began to prepare something for Fado, which turned out to be very effective. The prototype had been constructed and he began to feel better. Then it is told that his father gave him medicine and he immediately fell asleep for a while. So he apologized for what happened now. Fado took his sword and went to fight the monsters. He would observe the chaos they caused. One of them saw him, but Fado managed to quickly avoid their fireballs. He evaluated that monster and saw that it could throw fireballs, which was very dangerous. So Avarisha told him to use the Guardian because this weapon had the potential to cut anything. In this way, he managed to cut every fireball thrown into two. Other monsters also noticed Fado's presence, so they decided to attack together, creating a stronger fireball. But as they threw the fireball toward Fado, he countered with a very epic move. This successfully stopped the fireball, even killing each monster directly due to its sharpness. By defeating them, Fado also managed to steal their fireball abilities. He had ended all the monsters except their leader, who had two abilities, fireball and anti-fire. However, this didn't make Fado afraid at all. Avarisha told him that the monster would approach to throw a fireball, so he had to be cautious. The monster approached Fado, and Fado took his sword and jumped towards it, stabbing it impressively, splitting it in two. Now Fado had ended all the monsters. It was morning and Set talked to Fado, telling him that his father had died and only a few people managed to save the village. The land was no longer fertile because of the destruction caused by the monsters. Fado was told that now he would seek a job in the city to provide a better future for his daughter. Then, he asked Fado to hit him for the cruelty he had done to him when they were kids. Fado agreed, but it seemed he hit too hard because Fado's face turned red. But now there would be no more problems between them. Fado bid farewell, saying to Fadot to take care of himself before leaving the city. He visited his father's grave, saying that although he was bad for the village, it was a pity the village disappeared, but he still cherished memories of his father. Fado would miss his father greatly. He said that now he would be fine because he was getting stronger. On the other side, we see Roxy and her group. Miria said they would soon reach the Lanchester territory and could replenish their supplies to continue the journey to Galia. Mogan warned them to be cautious with Lord Lanchester. Roxy asked why, and he just said they would see him later. On the other hand, we see Fado, who was already heading to accompany Roxy. The carriage master asked him not to fall asleep because he promised to protect him from monsters or bandits. Suddenly, they met bandits who demanded they hand over everything or die. So Fado stepped out to defeat them all at once. The carriage master begged him to help because he promised to save him. Fado asked to be released because he was just in the way. The bandits felt confident they had won, but suddenly something fell from the sky, driving them away. This weapon belonged to May, the girl we saw earlier in conversation with Fadot. Avarisha immediately recognized her, and Fado also remembered her. May said she owed him a favor. The carriage that carried him also lifted when he boarded. His weapons looked so heavy that they lifted the entire carriage instantly. He spoke to his weapons, ordering them to return to normal so they wouldn't be too heavy. Now they would go together. Fado told his name, later referred to as Fado of Galia. He asked how Fado knew about his abilities, and Fado answered that he also had great sin abilities. Fado didn't understand what great sins were. Miria asked if he didn't tell Avarisha, which made her curious. Miria said his ability was anger and was glad to meet him. When his stomach growled this time, it wasn't Fado but May who brought a little meat for the journey, so he gave it to him to eat. The carriage owner told them they would soon reach that area. This city is guarded by the Holy Knight Rudolph Lanchester and is highly respected by the entire city. It turns out May and Fado had arrived. The carriage owner informed them that Rudolph was getting ready to welcome Roxy on the Galia expedition, which surprised Fado because he should have followed her, but she was already ahead. Now he just needed to wait for her to join. He started feeling very sleepy, so Fado carried him and they decided to find a place to sleep. On the way, everyone was friendly to him, which puzzled Fado, but then he realized that those people had symbols on their necks, which was very suspicious. Avarisha said they might have been chosen based on social class and Fado didn't pay too much attention to those symbols. Finally, they found a place to stay and Fado slept. He asked Avarisha how he knew May, who answered that they were old friends who often met, and also referred to her axe, which was also a great sin weapon. Fado said he wanted to know more about the topic, so Avarisha told about the abilities born from defying divine laws, such as gluttony, wrath, avarice, sloth, lust, envy, and pride. One of them, gluttony, was very sinful because it had the potential to overturn the divine hierarchy. When gluttony sensed a soul, there was no turning back. That was Fado's punishment. Avarisha said everyone had to pay their way. Fado wondered why he was always mocked for having abilities that only made him hungry, but when he felt he had become strong, he had to kill to survive. This made Fado feel very bad. Avarisha said he had to stop feeling like that because if Gula realized that his mind was weak, he would take over his body, so he had to be strong to fight it. When night fell, he would go out to kill some monsters. Avarisha asked him not to satisfy Galia directly, so he had to kill small monsters first and then look for stronger ones. Fado understood, then a sandman appeared and he decided to try to finish off the young man. Fado didn't feel good because his ability demanded monsters of a higher level, but Fado had to be strong and couldn't give up. On the other hand, we see Mike, who is already awake. He woke up hungry, so he went to look for food. Saw a banner saying that anyone who defeated the sand golem would receive a big reward. The townspeople were afraid of the golem, so they desperately sought someone strong to defeat it. They said that even the Holy Knight Rudolph couldn't face something like that, but for May it didn't matter, so he started thinking about it. On the other hand, we see Fado, who keeps killing sand people, but he starts to get used to killing low-level monsters. When he sensed the smell of a giant creature, he went to see it and it turned out to be the feared golem in the city. Some fighters tried to defeat it but failed. Fado attacked from behind to make the golem notice and pay attention to him. The golem was very angry. The fighters told Fado that he couldn't defeat it alone. Fado tried to attack it with fire arrows but failed. The golem used its ability, Sandstorm Eye, which produced a strong wind. If the wind carried someone, they would be crushed when hit by rocks. Fado used his scythe because his greed transformation could cut anything. Fado attacked the golem and managed to injure it. The red sphere we see is the core of the golem and it wants to escape, but Fado won't let it. He transformed and released a super fire arrow that destroyed the core, making the golem unable to recover. Fado defeated the monster and also stole the ability of Sandstorm Eye, which was useful for him. The fighters said he was amazing because they had never seen anyone as strong as him, so they thanked him. One of them asked what his name was. Fado didn't know what to say, so he took the alias Cadaver so people wouldn't know who he was. Now he goes to rest. When he wakes up, he sees Mike naked. He says he's very childish because he's not ashamed. Fado says he's embarrassed, but Mike says they're getting closer. Then May gets ready to defeat the sand golem, and Fado tells her he's dead, which makes May very angry because she wants the reward, but he asks her to calm down and he's willing to give her half later. They will then receive the reward. May asks why he wears that mask. He says he fights as a dead man and should get the reward as a dead man. At that moment, the Holy Knight Rudolph enters and asks Fado if he defeated the sand golem, so now he has to fight under his command and can't refuse. May approaches to say that she won't allow it because she found it first, and with her axe she sends him flying. This incident puts them in trouble because they hit a Holy Knight, so they decide to leave the city. Fado and May now head to Galia. On the way, May eats a lot, so Fado asks if she's really angry and not just greedy because she just ate. She says that anger burns a lot of calories, that's why she's very hungry. Fado says she eats too much and doesn't seem to gain weight. This makes May angry, and because she's connected to her axe, her weight immediately increases, which eventually breaks the sea cartwheel, but the owner is very kind and starts to fix it. However, it will take a long time. Meanwhile, May goes to visit the nearest village. Fado of course follows her. During their journey, they saw a large castle from afar. Arisha said it was the house and castle, and from here they were already close to Gaul. Fado mentioned that the place looked very peaceful, so there must be someone very powerful protecting it, and they met a village guard. Seeing the sword he carried, Fado realized he was a holy knight. Fado asked if they could stay here, and the man agreed, but he wanted to fight them first. He assessed Fado and was surprised to see that he was level 1 but with attributes of over 2 million. After that, a small battle began. Fado tried to hit him with his sword, but the man was so fast that he easily swept Fado's sword aside. Fado thought he would be kicked out for losing, but the knight allowed him to stay because he sensed their purpose in the meeting. But before that, he set the condition that they had to train with him during their stay. Fado asked what the reason behind the request was, and the man said it was just his wish. But in reality, he realized that he wasn't using his abilities in battle and felt his body was unaccustomed to his strength.